Co-production, at the very essence, is this idea that you make something together.
It's about having that open dialogue, that open conversation, and really listening to the communities when redisplaying works.
It's making sure that local people and local communities, if there's a project that's being designed for them to target them, then including their voice in that project so it becomes with them rather than for them.
What I think it should be is a kind of mutual exchange between museums and communities.
In the context of museums, it means creating exhibitions, interventions, and media that really equally makes something for public engagement with the people who have lived experience, people who use it, and the people who are part of civil society organizations.
If I walked into a museum that didn't have some kind of community voice at the heart of it, it would be really, really disparaging.
It means then that institutions, museums, universities are actually making positive change rather than keeping those spaces locked away.
It's also really important that I think museums take a good look at themselves and they actually scrutinise themselves, challenge themselves, and working with community groups makes us do that, makes us actually question what we're doing, why we're doing it, and who we're doing it for.
Obviously museums get a lot of funding, to present the history of certain communities, so I think it's important that some effort is put into giving back to them communities as well. That's what I think co-production should be.
If we just worked with those people a bit more and we did the groundwork to make them understand that museums are for them, and that you can go to a museum and you can see yourself and you can see people like you and you can see things that you're interested in, and it isn't just academic and scary and it isn't just a bunch of old objects behind glass. There are people looking after these objects that really care about these objects and care about you and about telling your story, then that would be the ideal museum.
We have these big establishments in all cities across the country, but it's the people, kind of working class people from those areas, you don't see represented in those institutions a lot of the time. And I think, co-producing, working with communities is part of addressing that inequity, I guess that's what you call it.
You can train and learn systems of co-production, but really it needs to be learned in practice of equally resourced making of something together that will have a social impact. And in this way, museums are so important because everything that is co-produced has both a legacy, which becomes an archive, and a lived experience of a vast community when you're looking at footfall.
You can't have a museum that functions and works for people and telling their stories without it. You can't tell a story on someone else's behalf.
There's a large discussion about how we decolonize museums, how we address structural racism. It's imperative that we consider new ways to address this desire to decolonize, to really invite people in to create understanding.
Not everything that is acquired by museums is acquired in a great way, and it's okay to admit that, and it's okay to hold our hands up and say, okay, well, we did something wrong here, let's not do this again, but also here's the full context of the piece, here's the journey it's been on to get to here, because I think that adds to the value of the piece rather than taking it away.
Working with adults to co-produce creates a cross-generational, intergenerational, cross-cultural investment in telling the stories of the people of Liverpool, of the people of Great Britain, of the people of the United Kingdom, and of the people who have come from countries that were colonized by the United Kingdom. Co-production really needs to be understood in terms of democratic practices and functionalities. For Migrant Artists Mutual Aid, co-production meant a residency of people with lived experience of migration and modern slavery working alongside museum professionals in a resourced environment supported by civil society, the Liverpool City Region Equality Fund, for example, to resource the making of an exhibition together.
Co-production work that we're doing with local disabled and neurodivergent people is part of my external partnership Curating for Change, and essentially we're, as part of that, developing a disability history sort of heritage hub web page on our website that's going to include loads of different disability heritage content. So we've built it from the ground up. Obviously we had kind of a vague idea of where it might go at the beginning, but they really influenced the entire process. And I care about the fact that some of those people, or people adjacent to those people, have had an input in how this was made.
Yeah, so the Sandbach project was basically a group of young people from marginalised communities in Liverpool. We all came together and we reinterpreted some particular sculptures that the Sandbach family owned. The project was basically to provide more historical context on how they accrued that art through their wealth, which was obviously accrued through slavery. So yeah, the project was just there to provide a little bit more context.
I think it's been, the Dorothy Cougar archive has been handled very sensitively, which is something that is quite unusual, you know, for institutions working with the histories of marginalised people. It's kind of easy because there's not that lived experience to lose a lot of it. And I think NML commissioning Writing on the Wall, which is a community organisation, has just made the work you know, so much better.
Before co-production, you have people who are experts by education creating exhibitions. Co-production means that experts by education and experts by experience can make public interventions together.
I think there's nothing that compares to co-production as an idea in terms of like being able to include people in their own stories at all. There's nothing quite like actually going to people and asking them to be a part of their own story and how we represent their community and involving them. Otherwise you're just taking someone else's words and like saying them back to them.
It's another angle on history, and it gives a fuller, kind of truer picture of what actually happens if you hear from somebody who has that lived experience.
Before we started, and this is where there was no way that people had the capacity to imagine how beautiful it would be. When you see yourself and your own artwork reflected back with such high production values, you experience yourself and your body as an important member of this society, of this community, of this democracy.
I think bringing in different communities and having that community engagement, you get that diversity of perspective so that you get the best outcome. And obviously for the Sandbach project, for instance, the people that were affected by the types of work that they did were black people, were people from these minority communities. So it only makes sense if you want to provide that context to engage those communities so that they can have their type of input. And obviously, again, with our project, Malik was the one that had a lot of input into that because it is his family and he's a person of colour and he comes from that type of community. So again, it only makes sense to engage those types of communities to tell those stories and to explain why it's relevant to us and why it's not just relevant to the art world.
I also just want to add, you can't go where you can't see yourself. So something like this is really, really important, because if younger people from marginalised communities, communities of colour, migrant communities, poor economic backgrounds can see themselves in these spaces, that's where they'll go. And in 10, 50, 100 years time, we might see their artwork in here, and that's really important to change the narrative of art is for one type of person.